Good morning, I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for Your Invisible Toolbox, the show that's based on the book Row and I co-authored, Your Invisible Toolbox, and each week we look at a tool for working more effectively with others.
And today we're going to talk about a topic that we struggle with, and we teach this stuff.
We do. It's a skill we are trying to perfect, and it's one that we get a lot of calls from clients. How can I handle this? They want tools around this as well.
You are so right. And the topic today is delegation. Those of you following along in the book, we're going to be in chapter 55. And before we get into our invisible tool, you've noticed there's another person sitting at our table. It's Chef Sid, and she owns a small business here in Des Moines, a growing business, and one of the things that's led to her success is the ability to delegate. So we're going to get to talk to her for a few minutes. We've put this up at the front end of the show because she's racing off to a client engagement, so she's going to scoot out after the interview. Thank you, Sid, for joining us. We're delighted you could come.
Thank you so much for coming. Catering by Sid, Sid's Catering, your business. We're so excited to talk with you.
Thank you.
You've had such an interesting trajectory in the food industry and started as a child. Can you share a little bit about just your past with our viewers?
I grew up in a large family. There were 9 of us, and my parents opened a bed and breakfast in Northeast Iowa, and at a young age I was making muffins and taking it to the guests. So I've always loved to be around people, and I love to make food.
And you've had a wide variety of experiences through your career in different ways of working with food.
Yes, I worked as a club manager and at Des Moines Golf and Country Club, and I've just been really, any way that I can work with food and people, I enjoy.
And then you started your own business. And
I did. I started my own catering company after being in the club management side of business. It's every weekend, every holiday. So I thought it would be easier to do catering.
Yeah, nights, weekends, and holidays.
Right?
That's got to be tough.
And now your business took off and it's weekends.
It did.
So you've had to learn, in order to grow as you have, to delegate effectively. So when did that become a necessity for you?
So after realizing that I could only do so much for myself, and you can only produce so much food out of one kitchen, I decided to open a second kitchen. So you can't be 2 places at once, so I had to hire help, which has been a godsend, and appreciate them every day because I like just to make sure that everything's taken care of, that the customers are taken care of, and that food is being made appropriately. So
okay. Absolutely. And how do you determine who to delegate what to?
Sure. So I believe there's a job for everyone, and I believe that not everyone is good at certain things. I really feel like once you meet someone for the first time, you can kind of tell if they would be better at the front of the house or better at the back of the house.
So kind of assessing the skills of what they might have to function appropriately?
Yes.
Okay. Have you experienced hiccups along the way?
Yes.
Delegation gone wrong?
Delegation revised. So I had a catering, and I needed to pull extra hands. So I decided to pull my bookkeeper out and send her on a catering. And she's great at my accounting and bookwork, but maybe not quite the people person and the organization for moving food product down the road.
Yeah, well, your food is your product, but also the experience you bring to people with regards to that food. So what effect does that effective delegation have on your customers?
Sure. Well, I believe that you're only as good as your last catering. So pleasing the customer and making sure that all of the steps to get a catering out is important. Whether it be taking the order, whether it be fulfilling the order to what the customer needs, or whether it be setting up for the catering and delivering.
I think that's true in our business
It's
too.
true.
We're only as good as our last training session.
Yes. How have you seen, as you've as you have turned things over to people you've
Mm-hmm.
delegated, you've assessed skills and what their interests are, how have you seen that affect the growth of their morale, their abilities?
So, I don't believe that work is really work if you really enjoy what you're doing. If someone isn't happy doing a task or doing a job and they don't enjoy it, then that's not the job for them, or that task isn't for them. But in my business, there are so many different places where I could plug someone in to have them make the whole show run.
Okay, absolutely.
That really gets to the heart of what we get to talk about today in delegation.
It definitely does. Well, before we let you go, will you tell us about this gorgeous food that you have here that you brought?
And so my whole love of catering is really buy fresh, buy local. And so I have kale chips, which are from Lee's Greens, fresh nasturtiums, and from also Lee's Greens. And a lot of the farmers that I purchase product from are women, so small farmer women. And I also specialize in people that have dietary requirements, whether you're dairy-free, gluten-free, vegetarian, raw, or just barbecue.
So wide range of things.
Yeah.
Well, and many of our viewers will have experienced your catering because we often have Sid come and cater here at the Tero Learning Center. You do such a beautiful job. Tell us what this odd-looking thing is.
Really
Sure.
looks good.
So those are kale chips, and those I did with sort of a pico and also cashews, and it's dehydrated to 105. It's considered raw, which raw, if you aren't familiar with, is nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables. So, and nothing heated over 105.
It's really an amazing-looking thing.
And healthy, so no grease for you.
Yeah,
It's
this-
all
Very good for us as well.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Thank
joining
you for
us. We
having
really
me.
appreciate you coming.
Such a pleasure.
Those
having
of you who
here.
do have catering needs, we encourage you to check out Sid. It's catering by Sid, CYD.com.
correct. Thank you very much.
And thanks for being here, and we're going to let you slip out. We know you've got a catering commitment in a few minutes. So.
Thank you, Sid. Oh, our interview with Chef Sid, that brings out so many interesting points with regards
It
to
does.
delegation and how it affects being able to actually build a business. And, you know, the delegation is always going to be an ask that has expectations in terms of that someone's going to be able to follow through effectively and do whatever it is we need them to do. And certainly in her business, it's going to be a telltale thing in terms of the
Yes.
product as well as the experience.
Oh, so many places where things can fall through the cracks, and that's true for all of our businesses. And we experience this at home as well. In the book, the story we share is really about a delegation situation at home that any parent of a teenager has probably experienced. So see if this feels familiar. You say to your young person, clean your room. And then on a different day you try, please clean your room. And then on another day you try, I'll pay you to clean your room. And then another day you try you can't go out until you clean your room. We try all kinds of bribery, punishments, rewards, pleas, begging, threats, trying to get people to do things. Why is it so hard?
It is hard, and if you think it's hard to have a teenager or a child follow through, talk about at work when you have to delegate to a colleague and get that follow through to happen. In fact, the corporate world struggles with this as well. And the Institute for Corporate Productivity found that out of 332 companies that they surveyed, nearly half of them felt that they had a somewhat high or high level of concern about people being able to delegate effectively. And we know that if we can't figure it out, it's going to have adverse reactions in terms of the business.
It absolutely will. And on the other side, if we can do it well, the benefits are enormous. Leaders get to focus their attention on other tasks. The people who are delegated to have the opportunity to learn and grow and take on new responsibilities. So let's talk a little about the pitfalls, the benefits, and some of the challenges.
Well, one of the things that makes it hard, delegation hard, and it's a challenge, is when we have to delegate a task we know how to do to a colleague because it's appropriate for them to do it now, and we see as they're doing it there either is no follow through or the result is not what we expected. That is so hard.
It is so hard. And what do we typically do, Deb?
Take it back. Take it back. I can do it myself and I can do it this many times faster. And so we take it back, and that's not effective to build a team.
That is one of the most common calls we get here at Tero. Please help me delegate. Help me figure out how to do this. Well, successful delegation involves leaders doing a couple of things. First, we have to be able to assess the skills and knowledge of the individual. And secondly, we have to be able to assess the motivation and interest level of the individual. And that actually sounds simple enough. But here's what often plays out. We will just ask the person, do you have any questions? Do you know what's required? How do you feel about this task? And people lie to you. Now, not intentionally, we lie to ourselves as well, but it is human nature to underestimate what a task involves. I did this weekend with a work-related task I thought was going to take a lot less time than it did. So we underestimate what a task takes, or we also tend to overestimate our own skills and abilities. And that combination really can contribute to delegation going wrong. So it's not enough to just ask someone if they know how to do it or if they want to. We have to do what Chef Sid was talking about and watch people. That's the leader's obligation. Watch and be a good observer so you can figure out where skills and interest are.
And if we can do that, the organization then can be effective. And the organization can be effective. It affects that positively, but also people's individual careers. So there was a study done, a Harvard Business Review study, that found that lawyers that could delegate effectively would actually increase their salaries by 20%, and top lawyers were able to bump up their salary by 50%. So it has implications for organizations as well as individuals. So let's take a look at our invisible tool. Let's dive into it in our development challenge of the week.
So it's time for your invisible tool of the week, and we are baking in a development challenge in this portion of the program. If you're following along in the book, you'll find us on page 136 in a chapter called Clean Your Room.
So we're going to go back to the clean your room example. We've all been there. And it's a good one to take a look at our invisible tool, which is to diagnose before delegating. How many times do we say to a child, clean your room? And then we realize they don't follow through. It doesn't look the way we thought it would look if the room were clean. We've delegated, but they didn't have the skills to do it. And it might be the fact that the clothes were on the floor. You're expecting them to be in the closet, but when you go in and they say the room's clean, they're on the bed. And so they've gotten off the floor, but they haven't gotten where they belong. And that's just shows we haven't diagnosed what's needed.
Exactly. And the same thing happens in business, where there's a disconnect on what one person thinks the job completion looks like and what the other person thinks the job completion needs to look like. And that's where we get into judgments.
Yeah.
So often a leader will say when it's a work situation, oh, this employee's not listening, they don't care, we start judging motivations, when in fact the problem is actually one of leadership, that we delegated when it wasn't appropriate. So if a person is lacking skills and knowledge, delegation is not appropriate. Training or coaching is going to be more appropriate.
Okay, so we have to diagnose the skills and the knowledge of the individual. What about their interest in doing the job?
And that's the second part of the formula that we talk about in this diagnostic formula in the book. We have to take a look, does the person want to do the task? Do they like doing it? We've all got things in our job descriptions that we're skilled in, but we don't like. And what happens then? We procrastinate, we make excuses, we put things off for a really long time. So for delegation to be successful, we have to make sure it's going to someone who's not only skilled, but also interested. Now that doesn't get you off the hook if you're not interested. So if they don't want to clean your room, you can't say, well, delegation isn't appropriate because one of those diagnoses failed. It's just that a different behavior is needed, and it might be encouragement if interest is waning, or it might be training and coaching that's necessary if skills are falling short.
Maybe working with them so that they understand your level of expectation of what a clean room is. Coaching.
Exactly.
Okay, well the clean room is a very simple example of something that we might delegate without a lot of extreme consequence, but we know that in business being able to delegate well results in really positive consequences, because that's how we build a skilled team. That's how we get more done. That's how we're able to do things that otherwise we wouldn't have time to do. It has a huge effect on business. And so our invisible tool of the week, learning to diagnose skills and motivation, is so important in terms of delegation. It's the key to it. And we're going to ask you this week, our development challenge is to look for opportunities where you can diagnose what's the skill level of the person, what is the motivation of the person, and watch what the things that they can do before we go into delegating. So diagnosing.
That is such an important thing to do. And one of the other landmines we fall into as leaders is this whole subject of motivation and attributing to a person. So we might say, oh, this person is motivated, or this person is so unmotivated. Actually, the truth is we're all motivated. The leader's challenge is to figure out by what.
Yes.
And as our guest, Chef Sid, said, that she has an employee that's highly motivated to do some of the back of the shop work and not the front work. That doesn't mean that this isn't a motivated person, but it's the leader's job to assign to them tasks that the task itself is motivating, not just if a person is motivated.
Diagnosis. So that's our development challenge. Let's take a look at our social media posts of the week.
So those of you who follow Tero on social media already know that we post useful links and content several times every day on interpersonal skills topics. We're going to feature 2 of them today, and our first featured post is actually to that research study from the Harvard Business Review that Deb was referencing a little bit earlier. It's an article called Research Delegating More Can Increase Your Earnings, and you'll find that on all Tero social media platforms today.
And our second post is one that we advertised on Friday on our commercial for the show, and it is so worth watching again and again. It's a TED Talk by Simon Sinek, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And if we want to inspire people into action when we delegate, we have to be talking to the part of their brain that's the decision-making part. This is such a fantastic YouTube
Oh, you got to watch that
It's
thing
just-
over and over again.
Yes, and we include it in one of our classes. We really appreciate all that's in there, and it's going to be on our Tero social media platforms on Wednesday, so check it out.
Well, thanks for joining us today. If you missed any portion of the program or you'd like to share it with others, you'll find the entire program loaded up to Tero's YouTube channel. Join us again next Monday morning, where we'll be live in studio at 9:03 Central Time, and we will explore another tool in your Invisible Toolbox.
And now it's your turn. We welcome you. Ideas and suggestions for future shows. What leadership interactions, what team scenarios are playing out in your business? Email your ideas to ideas@yourinvisibletooolbox.com. We will incorporate those into future shows. We also invite you to meet us out there on whatever your favorite social media platform is. And if you haven't subscribed to Tero's YouTube channel, subscribe below, and that way you'll be alerted to when all future shows are going to air. We want to thank today Kyle Plummer, who is our Director of Marketing and Communications, directing this show, Rachel Trainham, who is our camera person for this show, and Chef Sid.
And Chef Sid for being here, and we thank all of you. Before we sign off, we'd love to remind you that the book, Your Invisible Toolbox, is available on Amazon in paperback, in hardcover, and in e-versions, and you can click below to get a copy if you don't already have it. Thanks for joining us, and that's a wrap.